because it throws around fear so effectively. You know, it throws around this whole concept of fear so effectively, and also us as the African Americans not really understanding the whole process of slavery, not understanding slavery as the epitome of war, and how you, fear was the main thread, you know, into the African spirit, you know, and how it ultimately broke us, and now it's translated itself to, you know, a point of fear of losing the job, you know, fear of what people will say, you know, all these anxieties, you know, and we would have, and how can you have freedom of speech when so many people fear what other people even say about them, you know, and so many people are in direct compliance with such trends, you know what I'm saying, based on fear, because they're in fear of being themselves, you know, and in fear of using their own voice and saying how they feel, you know, just of being heard, you know. And it's like the fear of knowledge itself, you know, just denial, you know, understanding denial is something denial is, you know, we perceive fear as being a physical thing ultimately, you know, fear is being a physical thing, you know, violence or guns or, you know, whatever, you know, we perceive fear as a physical thing, but on the other hand, you have denial, which is the spiritual form of fear. You know, this is the intellectual form of fear, you know, and this ultimately manifests as fear of knowledge itself, you know, and fear of knowledge and wisdom itself. And in the Bible, you're looking for knowledge and wisdom. You know, Christ tells you, and that's the backwardness right there, you know, that Christ tell you, my people suffer from a lack of knowledge, you know, but in Adam and Eve, you have the serpent trying to show Eve to the tree of knowledge and wisdom, you know. So what kind of backwardness right here are you implanted with? You know, when Christ says that my people my people are destroyed from a lack of knowledge. And then the whole creation story, you have the serpent, which is really black people, us, you know, trying to show people they're gods, you know what I'm saying, and trying to point Eve to the tree of knowledge and wisdom, you know. And the inbred backwardness are right here in these things that I'm speaking, you know, and the whole use of, you know, denial, you know, us ultimately needing to understand and understand that denial is the intellectual form of fear, you know, and because we really see fear as something, like I say, physical, when we have many different types of fears of what people will say, you know, fears of knowing things, you know, fears of tomorrow, you know, whatever, you know. That's just another and continuing on with this backwardness, man. I hope y'all enjoying this, man. You know, just we're still on church. The backwardness on how all the broke people go to church. You know what I'm saying? All the broke people go to church, and this is a complex that was established ultimately through the Bible and through characters like King Leopold. You know, which in my opinion has to be the original King James. You know, guy like King Leopold, do your research on that white guy. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, you know, all the broke people go to church, basically. You know what I'm saying? You know, people going to church because they're suffering or whatever. You know what I'm saying? And understanding how this was bred in us just through this doctrine that we've accepted and taken it to our hearts, you know. Understand that in the Bible, you know, it says things like, you know, it's harder for a rich man to get into heaven, the poor shall be blessed, or whatever, you know, really kind of entraining people to damn near not even strive for economics almost, you know what I'm saying? And understanding how this is translated into our lives is the most important thing. You know, it's almost like shit when, especially to the point where you have your pastors up here giving, like, having you give them your tithes. You know what I'm saying? Tithes are the temple is the body, first off. That's why I don't go to no building You know, I don't go to no building on no Sunday service. I'm in church 24/7. As long as you dealing with truth, as long as you're reveling in truth, studying, researching, reveling in truth, showing yourself approved. You know, the body is the temple. You know, anywhere I take this 5'9" frame, I open up and I have church and I speak truth and I have wonderful dialogue, beautiful dialogue, and we open up, we build, and we reason, and we have church. No, we don't have to wait on no Sunday. We don't have to wait on no kind of time. We don't have to wait on nothing. The body is the temple. You know, so this is ultimately, this is because this is the place where, this is the vessel that the Almighty made. This is the vessel that the Most High made, so that He could communicate with us, and so that He could till to the earth, and so that He could understand life as you. You know, as you, and so He could go in as everything and understand it. You know, this is the uniqueness. You know, this is the uniqueness of the temple. This is the uniqueness of the temple. So understand that you are the church. You know, and that's why I say it's crazy that all the broke people go to church. You know, all the struggling people are in church. You know, pretty much. You know, and it's all based on the backwardness that was bred in us by saying things, you know, by the doctrine of, you know, the poor shall be blessed. You know, it's hard for a rich man to get into heaven, and you know, all of these little parables, you understand, of the rich and the poor, you know, and needing to understand that we have been corrupted. We have been corrupted and taught the earthly ways of ignorance, the earthly ways of ignorance and physical thinking, the earthly way of ignorance and physical thinking. So henceforth, we have long forgotten our original spiritual inheritance. You know, our original spiritual inheritance of right and wrong. You know, in the defense thereof. You know. Our whole computer, our whole spiritual computer has been corrupted through all of these aspects, you know, through so many aspects that we're going to continue to hit on in this, you know, in the backwardness. You know, our understanding of death is a total backwardness. You know, our fear of death is a total backwardness, because, you know, in the story of Christ, you know, it says that, you know, Christ ultimately conquered the devil through death. You know, and there are passages in the Bible that explain that a man that doesn't know about death doesn't know anything. A man that doesn't really understand death doesn't know anything. And you know, to understand that death is really nothing. You know, death is just the beginning. You know, this is the greatest movie ever. Life is truly the greatest movie ever. You know, and if Satan's greatest power is to put thoughts in your head, you know, death is the greatest thought in people's heads. You know. And ultimately, Christ, that's what resurrection is. You know, Christ conquered the devil through death, because resurrection can't happen unless one experiences what they call so-called death. You know,